It appears as though the elbows up theme continues for so many Canadians who refuse to visit the United States. And now, with 2 weeks to go in the peak summer travel season, we're facing an Air Canada strike or a lockout. How big will this impact really be? To chat about this in more detail is political columnist for the Toronto Sun, Brian Lilley, who joins us now from the Big Smoke. Now, Brian, how much could this strike or maybe lockout really hurt Canadians, even the carrier, Air Canada, at the same time?
Well, look, so many Canadians have already decided that they're going to cancel their travel plans to the United States. So that's impacted all of Canada's airlines, whether it's Air Canada, the country's biggest, is whether it's WestJet, Porter, discount carriers like Flair. They had planned on taking people to the United States for the summer, be it Florida, California, Arizona, Texas, Nashville, what have you. And a lot of those plans were canceled. Then people said, okay, well, I'm going to stay home. I'll vacation in Calgary. I'll go to Banff. I'll go to St. John's in Newfoundland. I'll visit, a relative that I haven't seen in a long time. Now those plans are up in the air. Air Canada is already starting to cancel long haul flights. Starting tonight out of major airports, Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, those long haul flights are being canceled. Other flights will be canceled over the weekend. They say that they're trying to rebook passengers where they can, but let's face it, it's one of the busiest travel seasons. You've basically got the summer travel season, you've got Christmas. Those are the two busiest times in the Canadian travel season, and we are in the middle of it. So this is going to have a big impact, both in terms of what it means for tourists, what it means for individual Canadians, what it means for the company as well. This is going to be difficult for them to recover from. I'm hearing lots of people say, I'll never fly Air Canada again. Look, we have limited choices in this country. I mentioned 4 airlines. That's about the extent of what we have. And many of them don't even fly to most of the spots that we want to go to. So whether you like it or not, it becomes a question of Air Canada or WestJet. And Air Canada still has more destinations than WestJet. So eventually folks will go back, but this is going to be a major hiccup.
China has hit Canada with a new round of tariffs, Brian, at close to 76% levy on canola seed oil. And so far, crickets from the federal government. So why the silence, and how do we even get here?
We got here for reasons that are kind of understandable. The Americans, under the Biden administration, decided that they were going to tariff Chinese electric vehicles. China's EVs were being sold at about a 50% discount of what it cost to make them. These things would cost about $25,000 US to make, and they were trying to sell them in Canada and the US for about $12,500 US. Why would they try and do that? Because they want to make sure that they are the dominant player in the EV market. Now, I know some of your viewers will hate the idea of EVs. They will never buy one. They will rail against them. But it is a growing segment of the auto sector, not growing as fast as some politicians would like, but it is a growing sector. And the Chinese were trying to flood the North American market at the same time as at that point the Biden administration, the Trudeau administration, were trying to foster a nascent North American electric vehicle industry. And allowing China just to flood the market as we're trying to build up was going to be economically detrimental. So, one, they were subsidizing their vehicles, cutting the price in half. Two, it would threaten the North American auto industry completely. And so we put 100% tariffs on that alongside the Americans, along with tariffs of, I believe, 25 to 50% on Chinese steel and aluminum, which they've also been dumping into our market for, probably well over a decade. So that led to China eventually deciding they're going to retaliate. But they didn't retaliate on similar products. They retaliated on canola. They retaliated on some seafood, some pork. Canola is a $43 billion a year industry in Canada, more than 200,000 jobs. This is massive. Premier Scott Moe was saying that it's bigger than auto, steel, and aluminum combined. Now, I looked at the numbers, and depending on how you crunch them, you can arrive at that. Other analysts will say, well, no, not quite, but close. But it's a massive industry. And If this was, huge tariffs on $5 billion worth of exports to China out of products from Ontario, the federal government, regardless of whether it was Mark Carney or somebody else, would be screaming about it. And so far, nothing. There's a mild statement from the industry minister. That's about it. The government simply is not paying attention to this. So the 75.8% tariff that China just slapped on is on canola seed. That's on top of a 100% tariff that they already had in place on canola oil and canola meal, two distinct products that come from the same plant. And then, as I said, the tariffs on some seafood and some pork products. They're also looking at tariffing pea starch, which is a major product out of Western Canada, primarily Saskatchewan, a bit in Alberta, and a bit in Manitoba as well. All agricultural products. People think that we're all about high tech these days, Hal. What are we talking about when we talk about trade? We're talking about peas, lentils, canola, pork, dairy with the Americans. We're still trading in agricultural goods. Why? Because we all have to eat. But this is a major thing. We've got to fix this.
Now, Brian, you've been writing that it has been more than 6 weeks since Mark Carney spoke with Donald Trump. Do you have any hope for a trade deal? And are we doing what needs to be done to ensure that our economy needs that much needed boost?
Back in March, when Doug Ford, Ontario's premier, was summoned down to Washington after he threatened to cut off the electricity, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, told Ford, and I've heard this from several people that were in the room, he told Ford, he told Dominic LeBlanc, who is Mark Carney's point person on Canada-US relations, and Francois Philippe Champagne, aka Frankie Bubbles, they were all in the room. He said, look, we're going to bring in these tariffs on April 2nd, but Canada, you are our top priority. We're going to get a deal with you. We went from a top priority to almost securing a deal at the beginning of June to Trump won't return our calls. I don't have faith that we're going to get a deal anytime soon. And look, the government is now saying no deal is better than a bad deal, but we still do have those tariffs. Beyond the ones we were talking about on canola, the Americans put 50% tariffs on steel, on aluminum, on auto parts that aren't CUSMA compliant, and not all of them are, on copper. These are major exports for our economy. So this is a big hit. We're starting to see rising unemployment. We need to be concerned about this, and we need to start thinking about, should we find a way to get a deal? Just saying elbows up is not a strategy.
Brian, the much anticipated Battle River Crowfoot by-election will be taking place in central Alberta on Monday. That's where Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is seeking a seat. Lots of political experts says he needs to win big. What are you saying?
Well, some people have said he's got to match what Damien Couric had in the last election, which was 82.8% of the popular vote in that riding. But look, the previous election, Damien Couric got 70% of the vote. And if you go back over 20 odd years of, the riding shifted a bit here and there, but over 20 odd years, that's the sandbox that the Conservatives have played in, between 70% and about 83%. As long as Pierre Poilievre lands in that, and I think he will, he's fine. If he gets a bit below that, he'll face some questions, but he'll still be okay. If he gets a lot below that, though, then he's likely going to be in trouble. He's running two campaigns at the same time. He's running the by-election campaign and his leadership review. He's got to do well in both of them in order to be able to survive. And I know a lot of people are saying, look, he's a loser. He's done. He didn't win a seat. There's lots of examples of Canadian politicians not doing that and winning later on. You can look at people like William Lyon Mackenzie King, among others.
Brian, the federal Tories raised immigration as part of an issue twice over the past week. Now let's break down some of the numbers here. Why isn't the public getting to see the latest immigration numbers?
Because the Carney government decided that they're going to change how they are presented. And so that's problematic. Are they changing them in a way that we won't be able to compare them to previous numbers? And, are they going to be massaged to help the Liberal government? This is supposed to be raw data. I mean, this is not a news release that's put out. This is raw data. And they just stopped presenting it after the March numbers were released in May. So we're now into our third month of not getting new data. They say it will be coming out soon, but I'm really not sure. And then the other issue that they raised on immigration is that we've got judges deciding based on a 2013 Supreme Court decision that, in my view, they're misinterpreting. They're giving lighter sentences for people who are not yet citizens and who commit crimes in order to stop them from losing their deportation or immigration status. The Supreme Court basically said, don't give them a harsher sentence based on this, don't give them a lighter sentence based on this, but give them a sentence within the realm. That's what they said back in 2013. Now judges are saying, you committed a horrible crime, but we're not going to give you a tough sentence because, well, you might not be allowed to stay in the country. Well, if you commit a horrible crime, Hal, I'll say this is the child of immigrants. I don't want you to stay in the country.
Right, Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll have a look at more of today's top national and international headlines.